Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. Let me ask you, do you think we have a big problem with our federal government? Well, if you do, stay tuned because we at Convention of States have a solution as big as the problem. Well, good evening again, everyone. My name's Dale Parrish. I am the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana, and want to welcome you to the broadcast. Just to give you some overview, our broadcast is set up in basically three segments. The first segment, we're going to have a discussion period, and our topic this evening is, well, now that Indiana is a passed state, now what? And we're going to bring Paul Phillips on, our state legislative liaison. And Paul and I are going to discuss this topic and hopefully fill you in on what here in Indiana as a passed state, and we'll explain what that means, but as a passed state, what we need to do now in the state of Indiana. Now, then our second segment we'll give you some general information. I'll go to my PowerPoint presentation and I'll give you just some general information about our state and Convention of States here in Indiana. And then the third segment, we will talk about the basics of Convention of States. The basics, there are three tenets to make up the basics of Convention of States. So we'll go through the three tenets of Convention of States. Hopefully recognize some people that have tuned in this evening, and then we'll close it out. Now, I want to take just briefly a little bit of time here and issue my warning that I always issue on every broadcast. In the event that your screen would freeze up or go blank, please just understand we've encountered a technical problem. Don't wait for us to come back on. It just takes too long to bring everything up again. So if that happens, just figure that we've had a technical problem and plan on joining us again next Monday evening at 7 o'clock. So hate to say that, but that does happen, and it has happened. Probably will happen again sometime. Things that we can't control from a technical standpoint. Okay, well, I want to, without further ado, want to bring Paul into the broadcast. So let me get him started to come in. And hi, Paul.
Hey, Dale. How are you tonight?
Just fine, just fine. Good to see you. Good to see you again. Well, Paul, I just told everybody we're going to talk about Indiana as a passed state. Now, tell everybody what that means, okay?
Sure. So Indiana has already passed the Convention of States resolution, and that is a request that we hold the convention. And the requirement is that we get to 2/3 of the states, or 34, requesting this convention before it happens. So we were the 6th state to pass such a resolution. It was passed on February 29th of 2016, a date that only comes along once every 4 years, right? So
right.
It was in a leap year. But to date, we've had 15 states pass the resolution. So right. Indiana was a very early adopter.
Okay. Now, Paul, unfortunately, many people think that, well, Indiana is now a passed state. There's really nothing else for us to do.
Yeah, that's correct. And the truth of the matter is there's a lot more for us to do.
Exactly.
And for the things that are ahead of us that we still need to accomplish, we're going to talk about in a minute. But in order to accomplish that, we need a very large and engaged grassroots army to influence our legislators. And that's why the most important thing that anyone can do, even though we're a past state, is to sign our petition, because that registers your support. We started this year with 30,000 petition signers in Indiana.
Right.
We set an ambitious goal to get to 40,000 by the end of the year. And as of today, at our halfway point, we're right on track at about 35,000 petition signers. Now, nationally, we're at about 1.3 million petition signers. But we need to grow that base, because it's by registering the support of everyday citizens that we're able to get attention of the legislators when we want to push them along in this process.
Well, and of course, on every broadcast, when I go through the basics, some of what we're going to say here in this segment, some I'll be saying again when I do the basics of Convention of States. But part of that, of course, is to ask people to get involved. We still need people to get involved, join the grassroots movement here in the state of Indiana. So you wanna just kind of run through. I know you've kind of set this into 3 categories, but run through how people can get involved and at what level they're involved in.
The way I look at it is there are 3 levels of involvement. So we know everybody's busy, they have lives, and can't expect everybody to get deeply involved in our movement. But if it's something that resonates with you, something you believe in, you can start by simply taking a couple of what I call transactional activities. And these are things that take almost no time. It's kind of a one and done, but they do mean a lot to us. So that is, as I mentioned, the most important thing is simply to sign our petition, to register your support. And you can do that at conventionofstates.com. And it's simply providing your name, email address, phone number, importantly, your home address, so we know who your legislator is. And this simply registers your support and gets you in the loop of information.
Okay.
Another thing you can do is simply connect with us on social media. Pardon me. You can like us on Facebook, connect on Twitter, connect on YouTube. And again, those are things that take almost no time at all, but mean a great deal to us. The second thing is you can commit to spending a little time on advancing the Convention of States. And maybe one of the most important things you can do there is to simply spend some time learning more about Convention of States. We have a vast amount of information on our website to bring you up to speed on Article 5, how the process works. We conducted a simulated convention back in 2016. There's a lot of video on that if you want to see what the process will look like. And we also have a lot of volunteer roles that don't take a lot of time, and you're kind of in control of how much time it takes. And one thing that comes to mind to me is to be a social media warrior. And these are people who spend time on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, commenting on articles or posts on the Convention of States topics to get a good positive message out there for us. Okay. And then finally, if you want to go all in, you can commit to an outcome, to the success of our movement by becoming a really invested leader. And most importantly, that would be in the role of a district captain, where you're the leader in your representative's district in helping to organize other volunteers and supporters.
This is really an important position, district captain. Of course, all the positions are important, but the district captain is the person that's on the front lines, and that person's talking to legislators and talking to people about trying to grow the grassroots and his or her district. Very, very important job in not only here in the state of Indiana, but nationally in Convention of States. Just had to throw that in.
Right on point.
Okay. All right. Now, so there's different levels that people can get involved. Okay. Now, I think you had some, you wanted to touch on what are the next steps here now in the state of Indiana?
Sure. As we mentioned, simply passing the resolution as we did in 2016 is the beginning, not the end of the process. There's a lot more that has to happen, and we have to be in a position with a strong and engaged grassroots to influence the legislature at each of these steps. So for us, the next step that's coming up, which we're working on right now, is crafting some legislation that's going to guide the process when the state legislature sends commissioners to the convention. It's going to ensure that things work the way that they're supposed to, and we need grassroots to influence the legislator when we come to a vote on this bill.
Now, Paul, how many commissioners will Indiana, as of right now, send to the convention?
Well, our current legislation specifies 2 commissioners and 2 alternate commissioners. And this legislation was passed before the Convention of States application. And we think it just needs to be updated to include more commissioners, perhaps an odd number to make voting a little easier. So those are some of the things that we're trying to get through the legislature.
Okay.
When we do get to 34 states, we have a slogan or a campaign here we call 34 Ready. We want to take care of having Indiana ready to go as soon as the 34th state passes. And that would include selecting who our commissioners are going to be. So we want to be in a position to influence that, to make sure Indiana's getting the best representation possible at the convention. And then the next step is going to be the convention itself. And that's something that's going to be the biggest political event of our lifetimes. And, imagine it broadcast on C-SPAN and all of the news channels. And we want to be highly involved there to influence what's going on, so the right amendments are going to be proposed. And then probably the biggest step in the process, and perhaps the most difficult one, is ratification of the proposed amendments. If we get 6 or 8 or 10 proposed amendments out of the convention, each one individually has to be ratified by 3/4 or 38 of the states. And we need that grassroots army to keep the pressure on to get the proper amendments ratified. So that's why just having passed the application for the convention is the start, and your involvement at least signing the petition and getting your support registered is just critical to what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Well, to wrap this up, Paul, is we need people to get involved. And even though we're a past state, I hope people understand now there's a lot of work yet to be done. And so we're always looking for people to get engaged. And I'm going to touch on this again a bit in the basics. But anything else you want to kind of wrap this up and bring it to a close?
Well, as you know, Dale, our end goal isn't the convention. Our end goal is self-governance, where everyday citizens like us are engaged in our government, and just going through this process is going to develop that grassroots and create an environment of self-governance.
Okay, very good. All right, Paul. Thank you very much once again.
Sure, it was a pleasure.
You please come back again sometime. Okay,
I would be happy to.
Paul is becoming a regular on this broadcast, thank goodness. And So I think you all will be seeing Paul frequently, quite honestly, on this broadcast. We utilize a lot of Paul's podcasts, free to be free podcasts. And how do people find your podcast, Paul?
You can find it at freetobefree.podbean, podbean.com.
Okay. And we also have them listed on our YouTube channel.
Yes.
COS Indiana. And we have links to all of these podcasts on there. So number of ways to get a hold of Paul's podcast. So again, thank you very much, Paul.
You're welcome.
Okay. Let me bring up my PowerPoint here. And I want to be sure and get this set up so that everyone can see it. And I'm going to then I'm told to use the slideshow option to actually give everyone even a better look at it. So that's hopefully you're seeing this on your screen and not seeing me along with it, but hopefully. So let's talk about some general information that we wanted to pass on to you about the state. First of all, the resources that we have available to us here in Indiana. Our main resource is our national website, conventionofstates.com. That's the first place you should go. And you know, Paul mentioned about signing the petition. That's where you find the petition. Go there, sign that petition, open an account with us, and there's a wealth of information on this website. So please, you'll hear us make reference to this website a number of times. Now, also embedded in the national website is our state website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. A little more focused look then on that page here in Indiana. Social media platforms, we're on numerous platforms. Facebook, Convention of States Indiana. As a matter of fact, this broadcast is is coming to you through our state Facebook page, Convention of States Indiana. YouTube channel, COS Indiana. That's very much an educational channel. We have narrated PowerPoint presentations on there. We have Paul's podcasts, and we also have recordings of these broadcasts that we're doing like tonight. So very much an educational resource. We're also on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana, Instagram, Convention of States Indiana. We're being set up on LinkedIn. So we're out there on various social media platforms. So you should be able to find us. A few numbers now with regard to our state. Paul had mentioned this, that in 2018, we hit 30,000 supporters here in Indiana. Been growing tremendously in Indiana, about a 40% growth rate. It's just very, very astounding. So given that growth rate, we've set 2019, we've set our goal at 40,000. And that's just what we're trying to reach. And we're about halfway to it. So we're making good progress. About 2,900 people have indicated a willingness to volunteer with us. We have about 40 people in leadership roles. Now, this is where, and Paul mentioned this also, if you have if you're inclined to want to get involved with us in Convention of States, more than just a supporter, then ask you to go to this national website, conventionofstates.com, click on the menu selection, Take Action, scroll down and look at the various volunteer positions that we have. And if one is of interest to you, open it up, read about it, and if you are very interested, then make application. You're not obligated in any way, but when you make application, then your name comes up on a report that I and others see, and one of us will then be in contact with you to discuss that further with you. Again, you're not obligated in any way, just a process to go through for us to get connected with you. So if you have any desire to get more involved, this is the way to do it. ConventionofStates.com, click on Take Action, scroll down, look at the different positions. All right, let's talk about the basics of Convention of States. 3 tenets: the problem, the solution, and the plan. Well, the problem, as I mentioned early on in the broadcast, we think basically the federal government's out of control. And what we mean by that is they lack the will and the courage to address some very, very basic structural issues that are not being addressed in our government. Now, we're not blaming any one political party. Believe me, both of them have contributed, and it's been going on and building for decades. It's not just a recent thing. So, but bottom line is our government lacks the will and the courage to address these issues. Now, we've identified 3, we refer to them as abuses of the federal government, but we've identified 3 areas where that make up this problem. The first area has to do with our national debt. If any of you followed this, you know that we're over $22 trillion in debt, coming very close now to $23 trillion. Unfunded liabilities, the last number I heard was over $250 trillion. So very little to nothing is being done to address this particular problem, and it's accumulated over decades. Okay, so our national debt. Number 2 is the regulatory crisis. Yes, I know the current administration is eliminating a number of regulations, but much more needs to be done in this area, especially in the area of controlling how these regulations get generated. So, and controlling that process and getting more of a say-so from we the people and how those are created. And the last area has to do with state sovereignty. When our country was founded, there was this concept of dual federalism where the federal government would share power with the states. Well, that has, over the years, has all tilted toward the federal government. Yes, that includes power and money. And we think the career politician plays a role in this too. So you'll see one of the areas we want to address is term limits. So, okay, those are the 3 abuses that we've identified as part of that make up the problem that we see. Now, the solution is right in the Constitution. It's in Article 5 of the Constitution. Article 5 describes 2 methods available to us to propose amendments to the Constitution. And we're going to touch on those 2 methods right now. But proposing amendments to the Constitution is what we're all about. These amendments obviously would address the problems that we've identified and the abuses we've identified. Now, the first method described in Article 5 is whereby 2/3 of Congress would propose an amendment or amendments, and then those amendments would have to then be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, which would be 38 states. Once ratified, then the proposed amendment becomes an amendment to the Constitution. Now, there is a second method. We're not making this up. Like I said, this is part of Article 5. And the second method is where 2/3 or 34 states, 2/3 of the state legislatures apply to hold a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments. Any amendments that would come out of that convention would then have to go through the same ratification process as in method 1. 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states, would have to ratify any of the amendments. Once ratified, then they become amendments to the Constitution. Okay. What's our plan? What's our plan to bring this about? Our plan's broken down into two parts. The first part is what we call the application strategy. 34 states have to apply to hold this convention. Well, we've designed the application that we want all 34 states to use. And it's important because it is a requirement that all those applications be the same. Well, what we've designed is an application with a subject matter. That subject matter determines the agenda of the convention, but the subject matter is broken down into 3 areas: fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Those are the 3 areas that we want the convention to focus on to propose amendments. And obviously, those are the 3 areas that directly relate to the 3 abuses that we see in our federal government. Now, the second part of our plan is mobilizing the grassroots. And when I say the grassroots, I'm talking about you, me, and our state legislators. Mobilizing the grassroots to make this happen. And that's what we're trying to do. Now, as I mentioned, here in Indiana, we're over 30,000 supporters. We have, as far as supporters are concerned, we have nearly 3.9 million supporters across the country. So Convention of States is now in all 50 states. So we have a great deal of momentum going. As Paul mentioned, we have already passed this resolution or this application here in Indiana. So we're a passed state. 15 states have signed on and passed this application, or passed the resolution. So we got to get to 34. If you're interested at all in participating and getting involved, please go to the website, sign up, and we'll be talking to you about your involvement. All right, let's get back to the screen here, and I want to now recognize some people that have joined us this evening. And let me see, Joe Williams. Joe, I'm not sure where you're from, but thanks for joining us this evening. Candace Parker, thank you, Candace. Nice to see you. These are some new names. I really like this. Kenny Griffin. Kenny, thank you for joining us. Thank you. And Jerry Rowe. Jerry's one of our state information analysts here with Convention of States in Indiana. So Jerry generally tries to come on with us every week. So we appreciate him being with us tonight. So all of you that have joined us, we thank you very much for being with us this evening. I do want to tell you that our next week's broadcast, next Monday, we're going to have one of our district captains come in and talk to you. His name is Richard Loken. And Richard is, as I said, a district captain in District 17 here in Indiana. And Richard and I are going to talk about enumerated powers. See, in our Constitution, I won't get too far into this, but in our Constitution does, in fact, set forth the areas in which spending is authorized. And those areas are called the enumerated powers. Well, Richard's going to talk about those. And it's funny how the spending of our federal government has gone way beyond these enumerated powers. But that'll be part of what Richard's going to talk to us about, what we're going to discuss in our first segment that evening. So looking forward to that. And otherwise, I want to close out this evening as we normally do. And one of our founders, Mark Meckler, has a quote that I've always liked, and I use this. I know I use this on every broadcast, but he says, his quote is, he says, you know, our country is in fact faced with a very fundamental question, and that fundamental question is not what should we do. The fundamental question is who will decide, and we think this is very important. So as Mark says, the question facing us is a two-word question, very simply, who decides? Well, in Convention of States, we feel that we, the people, should have a bigger say in who decides. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and put us on your calendar for next Monday evening, same time, 7 p.m. And we'll be back, and we'll be talking about Convention of States again. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye.